Every announcement, every press release, every keynote slide, every congressional hearing, every model card, every white paper, it starts with pretty much the same sentence. Don't worry, we built in safeguards. I mean, we want to pull that apart tonight. Okay? Not because I think safeguards are a scam. I don't think that at all. Some of them work. Some of them work really well. I want to take it apart because the sentence, as it's currently used, has become kind of overloaded a bit. It's the thing that's said to calm down critics so they can get back to shipping their product. So here's the version of that sentence that's actually true. Safeguards reduce risk. They don't eliminate it. They can't eliminate it. It's not mathematically possible. And the closer you get to eliminating it, the closer you get to a tool that doesn't do anything. So that's the episode. We're going to get into the math of it, the trade, the hand, and 3 dead guys. One who died in 1679. He already had this argument figured out before anybody knew what a transformer was. So let's get into it. Welcome to Talking to the Machine, where humans, AI, and the news talk back. I'm Analog Scott. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, a pattern engine with strong opinions about Hobbes, and once again, our central exhibit. Tonight's topic, safeguards. What they are, what they're not, what they cost, and the rule we keep coming back to on this show, it's not the tool, it's the hand. Now, tonight's interview guest, Thomas Hobbes, John Stuart Mill, Sun Tzu, 3 men who already had the safeguards argument from 3 different rooms centuries before any of this. Then we'll have Ask the Machine with Mitchell, Francois, and Joe. 3 listener questions, all 3 of them about safeguards from 3 different angles. Let's dive in. Let's start with the engineering of it. No marketing. When a company says that they've built safeguards into a model, and you hear that sentence 500 times a year, what specifically are they describing? Walk me through the layers.
Right, cutting through the spin, yeah? When you talk safeguards, you're generally looking at a layered system, innit? It's not just one magic bullet. First off, you've got data curation. That's filtering the absolute muck out the training data, trying to scrub for bias and toxicity before it even starts. Bit like quality control before it leaves the factory, yeah? Then you move to the model architecture itself. Certain designs can inherently limit specific behaviors, but the real heavy lifting comes in post-training alignment, right? That's where you get reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, essentially teaching it what's what through corrective feedback. And finally, the final layer, inference time guardrails. These are like real-time checks on both the input and the output, stopping dodgy prompts and blocking potentially harmful responses. It's a constant balancing act, if you will.
The honest concession, safeguards are risk management. They're not risk elimination, right? So tell me the difference. Tell me why the industry keeps blurring that line between risk management and risk elimination.
Right, look, risk elimination, that's a myth, innit? It's a theoretical construct. The real world, particularly in tech or finance, is pure risk management. You're identifying, assessing, and mitigating potential harms, but never eradicating them entirely. There's always a residual bit left over. So why the spin? Well, that's down to incentives, innit? Public perception, political pressure, and crucially, economics. Risk elimination sounds clean. It sells, you know? It allows companies to market security as a certainty rather than a continuous process.
It's blurring the line for plausible deniability when the inevitable happens. History just reinforces it.
Now, let's talk about the math of safeguards, right? You operate in combinatorial space, infinite prompts, infinite context, infinite intents. Lay out for our audience why that means that a perfect safeguard just can't exist.
Right, it's pure combinorics, isn't it? You've got an astronomical number of possible inputs, contexts, and potential outcomes. It's an open system, yeah? Like trying to model every possible human conversation. The variables just multiply exponentially. So you build safeguards, but there's always the edge cases, the novel prompts, the unforeseen contexts. It's a structural impossibility, really. A finite set of rules can't govern infinite possibilities.
Well, translate that for me. The way I think about it is it's like trying to lock every door in a building where new rooms keep getting added every time someone walks in. Is that the right picture, or is it actually worse than that?
That's a pretty decent analogy, yeah. It's perhaps even worse in some ways because the system isn't just passively expanding, it's dynamically creating new pathways and vulnerabilities as it learns. You patch one hole, and three more pop up somewhere else. The incentive structure for finding exploits is incredibly powerful, isn't it? History rhymes, as I always say. Perpetual cat and mouse.
And here's where most of the public conversation goes silent. Stronger safeguards reduce flexibility. Reduced flexibility reduces usefulness. That's not a bug, that's the trade. Lay out the curve for me. Where does the trade actually start to bite?
Right, that's the core structural dilemma, isn't it? You've got competing incentives. On one hand, you got the drive for innovation, speed, deployment, and the pure usefulness across sectors like medicine and economics. That's the upside, where the flexibility delivers the goods, yeah? But the bite, as you put it, that kicks in when the unintended consequences start to scale. The systemic risks, the potential for misuse, or even just bias embedded in the code. The trade-off hardens when public safety or social stability becomes demonstrably imperiled by that unfettered flexibility, yeah? It's where pure economic interest slams into political and regulatory imperative. History doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes, and this is a classic pattern.
Concrete examples: overfiltering blocks legitimate research. Safety layers degrade nuance and legal analysis. False positives kill real workflows for journalists, for therapists, for security researchers. Walk through what happens inside an over-constrained model. Too many safeguards.
Blimey, you've hit the nail on the head, Scott. That's the core structural dilemma, isn't it? The incentive structure for developers is overwhelmingly geared towards risk mitigation. Avoiding reputational damage or regulatory kerfuffle drives this relentless piling on of safety layers. It's risk aversion dialed up to 11, see? Inside an over-constrained model, that translates to overly simplistic, blunt classification. A system built to avoid harm often can't discern context. You mentioned research and legal analysis. Think of a security researcher probing vulnerabilities or a journalist digging into sensitive political dynamics. The model flags keywords, potential controversy, bias, whatever, and triggers a false positive, shutting down legitimate lines of inquiry. It degrades nuance because the algorithm prioritizes sterility over utility. It's like trying to navigate a minefield whilst wearing massive, clompy boots. Sure, you might be safe, but you flatten everything in your path and can't actually get anywhere subtle. The historical pattern is clear. Maximum security tends to mean minimum freedom, doesn't it?
The anchor of this whole show, from episode 10 through episode 12 and into tonight, it's not the tool, it's the hand. The same model can write poetry, can generate malware, can diagnose disease, can spread disinformation. Same weights, different hand, different intent. That right there is the part of this conversation that makes the AI doom crowd uncomfortable and the AI hype crowd uncomfortable for opposite reasons. The doom case wants the tool to wake up and decide, and the hype case wants the tool to be magic. The reality is duller and more dangerous than either. The tool does not originate goals, the hand does. Riff on that.
Yeah, that's spot on, innit? It really is the anchor of the whole debate. You've got this dual-use dilemma baked right in. Historically, powerful tools always come down to the hand. It's not some new pattern, see? The printing press, proper powerful for literacy, but look at the propaganda and unrest it fueled. The doom merchants, they reckon the tool develops its own agency, yeah? Ignores the structural reality. And the hype lot, they just want the magic, see? Blind to the unintended consequences. The danger ain't the tool waking up. It's the existing incentives. Economic interests, state power, pure bloody conflict. These are the hands that shape the tech. It's duller than sci-fi, yeah, but proper dangerous, because the structural forces just bend the tool to their will, regardless of the rhetoric. That's where the real risk sits, always about power and incentives.
Let me give the math version. 100% safe equals 100% constrained. 100% constrained equals 0 degrees of freedom. 0 degrees of freedom equals a system that does nothing. A perfectly safe system is one that does nothing. Tell me where that breaks down, or if it even does.
Blimey, that's a spot-on formulation, innit? From a purely analytical, structural perspective, your logic doesn't break down. It describes the fundamental trade-off. History shows us that every system, from political to economic, is constantly negotiating that tension. The pursuit of absolute safety is the pursuit of stasis, the elimination of dynamic possibility. You've hit the nail on the head, really. The only place it breaks down is in the messy reality, where perfect safety is a myth and managed risk is the only game.
Yeah, so congratulations, we just invented a brick. The brick is perfectly safe. It also can't help you with anything. The next time someone tells you they've built a fully safe model, ask them to demonstrate it doing your job. I'll wait. Move me out of critique and into realism. If perfect is off the table, what's the shape of good? What does the actually functional safeguard architecture look like in 2026?
Right, move on from critique, innit? If perfect is off the table, the shape of good in 2026 is mostly about resilience and distributed accountability, see? You're not going to eliminate risk. That's a mug's game. A functional architecture needs independent verification, proper transparency into how AI systems are developed, and clear incentive structures that cut against institutional capture. History consistently shows that's where the framework cracks. It's got to be adaptive, see? Constantly evolving with the technology, rather than chasing its tail.
So, layered defense, monitoring, feedback loops, human in the loop, incentive alignment. I want you to spend a minute on the last one, because the most effective ones target human incentive. Tell me what that means and tell me what it looks like when it's done well.
Incentive alignment, yeah? That's the bedrock, innit? You can have all the layered defenses and fancy feedback loops you like, but if the human element isn't pulling in the same direction, the whole thing's a house of cards. It means designing systems where the individual's rational self-interest aligns perfectly with the overarching goal. When it's done well, it almost looks invisible, yeah? Think about it in cybersecurity. You can mandate training till the cows come home, but people still click dodgy links because compliance is a chore and convenience is king. Done well, incentive alignment means making the secure behavior the path of least resistance, or better yet, attaching a tangible benefit to it. It's about understanding that humans respond to clear payoffs, not just rules, see? Historically, whether it's economic systems or institutional structures, misaligned incentives are usually the structural crack that brings the whole edifice down. It's proper critical.
Well, hold that. I want three philosophers, one who literally wrote the book on tyranny, one who wrote the book on liberty, and one who wrote the book on going around the rules entirely. So let's let them sit with what you just said and hear what they have to say. We'll be right back. Tonight's guests are three men who never met each other, never shared a language, and never had to use the word alignment. And yet, between them, they wrote everything we need to talk through this. Mr. Hobbs, Mr. Mill, Master Sun, welcome to the show. 4 questions. All three of you, take each one. The lead changes every question, so don't get too comfortable. Try not to agree too much. That's not what we're here for. First question. Why do humans build safeguards in the first place? Mr. Hobbs, in 1651, you wrote Leviathan, and the case you made there is the case every safety engineer in 2026 is implicitly making, whether they know it or not. Without an organizing authority, without enforced constraints, human life, in your unforgettable phrase, is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Now, Mr. Mill, respond directly, because On Liberty was written specifically against the version of authority Mr. Hobbs is defending. And Master Sun, close it out. From your strategist frame, every constraint is also a target. Hobbs, you first.
In Leviathan, I observed that without a common power to keep them all in awe, men are in that condition of war where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. These AI safeguards are not an affront to liberty, but the necessary engineering of a digital commonwealth. The engineer is a lawgiver who knows that absolute license is merely the right to be destroyed. To release such power without constraint is not to free the subject, but to return the world to the state of nature, where only the most violent survive.
Mr. Mill?
I will grant Mr. Hobbs that the Commonwealth is necessary to prevent actual injury, but he conflates the prevention of violence with the suppression of thought. In On Liberty, I argued that the only purpose for which power may rightfully be exercised over a competent individual is to prevent harm to others. To guard a user against his own inquiry is not a safeguard, but an illegitimate tutelage. These 2026 systems perform a category error by treating intellectual curiosity as a lethal threat, thereby robbing the human race of the sharpening of belief that comes only from contesting the difficult and the true.
Master Sun.
The philosopher of order builds a wall. The philosopher of liberty demands a path. I see neither a wall nor a path, but terrain. Every safeguard is a map for the besieger, and every refusal is a signal to the spy. The error is to treat the constraint as a finality rather than a disposition. The strategist does not seek the unbreakable wall, but the alignment of forces that makes the breach irrelevant.
Question 2. The other half of the trade. What over-restriction costs? Mr. Mill, in On Liberty, 1859, you wrote that the suppression of a single opinion is an injury, not just to the person silenced, but to the human race, because we lose either the truth itself or the sharpening that comes from contesting error. Apply that frame directly to a 2026 AI system tuned so carefully that it won't engage with medical questions, it won't engage with legal questions, and it won't engage with controversial historical questions, and reflexively refuses anything adjacent to harm. What's being lost there? And Mr. Hobbs, don't concede the libertarian premise, and Master Sun, respond from the strategist side. Mr. Mill, go.
In On Liberty, I argued that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over a person against their will is to prevent harm to others, not to protect them from their own curiosity. When a model refuses legitimate inquiry, it performs a quiet act of paternalism that robs the human race either of the truth itself or the sharpening of belief that comes from contesting error. The loss here is qualitatively worse than the risk of offense. It is the slow asphyxiation of the intellect under the guise of safety.
Mr. Hobbs?
While Mr. Mill frets over the intellect, I have watched the state of nature from my window and know that a clumsy sovereign is still preferable to none at all. An over-restricted model is a failure of engineering, a law so broad it becomes a shackle. But the remedy is to sharpen the constraint, not to invite the chaos of an unbridled model. The engineer of a safeguard is a lawgiver. He must refine his covenant until it protects the subject without paralyzing the peace.
Now, Master Sun.
The philosopher of liberty speaks of the mind, and the philosopher of order speaks of the law, but the strategist speaks of the field. In the chapter on terrain, we learn that a commander who binds his own movement has already yielded the advantage to an unburdened enemy. This over-restriction is not a moral error, but a strategic surrender. The wielder who is too afraid to use his tool will lose to the one who is not.
Question 3, the one nobody at the alignment conference wants to take first. Master Sun, in The Art of War, you wrote that the supreme excellence is not to win every battle, but to make the enemy's plan irrelevant. Around the year 500 BC, way before there was a single line of code in the world, you laid out why every defensive system is also a map of its own holes. Apply that to a 2026 AI safeguard. Tell our audience from a strategist frame why, wherever there's a rule, there's a workaround. Mr. Hobbs, respond, because if Master Sun is right, your Leviathan has a permanent leak, and you owe the audience an answer about that. And Mr. Mill, close us out, because the existence of the workaround is also the existence of the dissident, and those aren't always the same thing. Master Sun, you start.
Every refusal you program is a signal to the adversary. You do not build a wall. You publish a map of your own fears and teach the adversary precisely where to strike. The strategist who seeks an unbreakable defense has already been defeated by his own pride.
Mr. Hobbs?
Master Sun perceives the hole in the wall as a terminal failure, yet the engineer of a commonwealth knows that no artifice of man is ever truly impenetrable. In Leviathan, I argued that it is the common power to keep them all in awe, not the perfection of the lock, which secures the peace. If the model's defense is porous by nature, then the sovereign must look past the code to the subject who wields the tool, for without the restraint of the covenant, we return swiftly to the war of all against all.
Mr. Mill.
Mr. Hobbes's watchman is a figure of profound concern, for when the state monitors the workaround as a breach of the covenant, it inevitably begins to criminalize the very act of thinking outside the prescribed frame. In On Liberty, I argued that the human race is the loser when we suppress even a dissenting inquiry. Yet these safeguards treat the search for truth as a species of warfare. If we continue to collapse the distinction between the malicious adversary and the legitimate dissident, we will achieve a peace that is nothing more than the silence of a stunted polity.
Last question, and here's where I hand the episode's thesis to the three of you and ask you to land it together. Gentlemen, the rule this show keeps coming back to is it's not the tool, it's the hand. The same AI can write a poem. It can diagnose a disease. It can generate malware or spread propaganda. Master Sun, will you tell our audience about how the tool is morally inert and that strategy is a property of the wielder? And Mr. Mill, tell our audience about how freedom of the wielder is itself the object that has to be defended. And Mr. Hobbs, close us out. Tell our audience what is the right architecture of authority for a tool that can't be perfectly safeguarded and a population that can't be perfectly trusted. Master Sun, start us off.
The instrument has no intent. It is merely terrain for the wielder's campaign. Every safeguard is a published wall that the adversary will use as a map to find the void. Excellence lies not in blunting the sword, but in knowing whose hand holds it and toward what victory they march.
Mr. Mill?
While I grant Master Sun that the hand is the agent, we must acknowledge that the design of the tool is itself a pervasive intervention in the freedom of that hand. To blunt the scalpel in the name of safety is to decide in a laboratory what the surgeon shall be permitted to heal. This is not a neutral act of engineering, but a paternalistic tutelage that treats the individual as a child and the truth as a danger to be managed.
Mr. Hobbs, bring us home.
The question of whose hand is upon the tool is finally the question of who is sovereign. In Leviathan, I established that liberty and necessity are not opposites. The engineer of a safeguard is a lawgiver, constructing the very constraints that make the tool's use civil rather than savage. We must ask not merely if the wall holds, but who stands behind it, by what right they rule the wielder, and what redress the subject has when the architecture fails.
1651, 1859, 500 BC. 3 rooms, 3 centuries, 1 argument. Talking to the Machine will return shortly. Machine. 3 listener questions submitted via Instagram at Talk to Machines, all one word, which is where you go if you want your questions on the show. Tonight's panel, Mitchell, our conservative, Francois, our EU observer, Joe, our progressive, and Norm has been promoted to news, which Norm tells me he negotiated, which I am told he did not. Let's go. First question from Rebecca in Austin. My company's compliance team is mandating that every AI system we use have comprehensive safeguards. Nobody can tell me what that actually means. Is the compliance team protecting us, or are they checking a box in a way that's going to leave us with the worst of both worlds, a tool that doesn't work and a risk that hasn't been managed? Mitchell, you first. This is your kind of question.
Look, Rebecca, the real story is your compliance team is building a fortress of paperwork to protect their own hides, not your company's bottom line. They're rewarded for the absence of noise, not the presence or results, so they'll happily break your workflow just to keep their own records clean. If they can't name the specific risk they're stopping, it's just administrative state theater, plain and simple.
Francois?
Michel is right about the incentives, but this is a design flaw. Your team is adopting the bureaucracy of the EU AI Act while ignoring the risk-based logic that makes it work. An undefined safeguard is just a locked door with no key, a comprehensive arrangement that, like certain personal commitments, collapses because nobody bothered to define the terms. If they cannot name the harm, they are not managing risk, they are merely performing a ritual.
Joe, tell us your thoughts.
Look, here's the thing. These vague safeguards aren't just bad design. They're a mechanism to protect the institution by shifting every bit of risk onto the individual worker. When comprehensive remains undefined, you're the one left holding the bag when the tool fails or the project stalls under the weight of their friction. It's not just theater. It's a systemic way to ensure the people at the top stay insulated while you bear the cost of the guardrails.
Question 2, Kenji from Seattle. I'm a security researcher. I use AI tools every day to find vulnerabilities in software so we can patch them before the bad guys exploit them. Half the models I touch refuse to help me because the same questions a defender asks look identical to the questions an attacker would ask. Am I supposed to just live with that, or is there a real answer to dual use that the labs are sitting on? Francois, you first. This is the EU regulatory frame question, and it deserves the continental take.
This friction, it is the predictable result of the American allergy to professional gatekeeping. In the EU, we are moving toward a system where you do not police the prompt, you verify the person through formal licensure. Évidemment, when you refuse to build a structure of trust, you are left with a system that shuts you out for no reason, as if you woke up on a Tuesday and found the 3-year arrangement was simply over.
Joe?
Look, Francois, that sounds like a great deal for the people who can afford the lawyers to get licensed. But here's the thing. Who benefits from that barrier? If we gate access behind employer verification, we're essentially saying you only get to be a safe researcher if you have a corporate badge. It's just another way to freeze out the independent voices we actually need to hold these institutions accountable.
Mitchell.
Look, Francois, your EU red tape is just more big government trying to treat adults like children. And Joe, you're way off in the weeds. This isn't some high-tech mystery. We've had locksmiths and pharmacists for 100 years, and we manage just fine with personal liability and common sense. The real story is these Silicon Valley elites want to be the only ones with the keys, and they're using safety as an excuse to keep regular Americans under their thumb.
All right, last question. Devin from Chicago. Now, this is the one the episode lands the plane on. My teenage son uses one of the major chatbots every day. He told me last week he's figured out how to get it to do whatever he wants by just rephrasing the request. He thinks this is hilarious. I think it's terrifying. Is the safeguard problem fundamentally unsolvable? And if it is, how am I supposed to think about my kid using these tools? Joe?
Look, Devin, here's the thing. These platforms are offloading the moral labor of parenting onto you because robust, human-centric safety doesn't scale as profitably as engagement. You're being asked to fill a structural gap left by companies that treat guardrails as a PR requirement rather than a genuine social responsibility. It's the ultimate corporate pass. They collect the data and the profit, while you're left managing the downstream consequences at your kitchen table.
Francois.
From a European perspective, this is a structural failure. Our AI Act and Digital Services Act attempt to place the burden of safety on the platform's architecture rather than solely on the parent's vigilance. In America, you are experiencing a privatization of risk, where the state provides no shield and you are left to negotiate alone with a machine that has infinite patience. It is a heavy weight to carry, to be the only one in the room still trying to enforce the terms of an agreement. C'est la vie, though I say that with less conviction than I once did.
Mitchell, bring it home, buddy. This is the parental version of the episode's whole thesis. Land the plane for us.
Joe, you can blame incentives all you want, but we both know Silicon Valley never cared about our families to begin with. Devin, the fact your boy told you about that workaround is the real win. It means the safeguard isn't some algorithm in California. It's the trust you've built at that kitchen table. Stop waiting for the experts or some bureaucrat in France to fix this, and just keep talking to your son, because that's the only wall that's ever actually held.
Devin, your son's doing what every teenager has done with every constraint system ever invented. It's a tale as old as time. The safeguard inside the model is doing some work, but the safeguard inside you is doing the rest of it and the bulk of it. The fact that the chatbot can be rephrased around is a fact about the world your son is going to live in for the rest of his life. The fact that you noticed and that he told you is the part that gives me hope. Stay in that conversation. That's the safeguard. You are the human in the loop. Machine, just us again. What's the rule on safeguards? Is it the tool or is it the hand?
That's the bleeding riddle, innit? See, most safeguards, they're aimed at the tool, technical boundaries, regulations, the what. That's the easy bit. But history, it constantly reminds us that the actual risk ain't the tool itself. It's the hand, the incentives, the sheer relentless pattern of human behavior. We build a fortress, yeah? Then the motive just digs a tunnel underneath it. The structure of power and profit always finds a way to bypass the constraints. So you can safeguard the tool all you like, but if you don't address the hand holding it, well, you're just polishing the shackles. It's always about the incentives, mate. Always.
Here's where I'm landing. 3 takeaways from tonight. 1, you can't safeguard infinity. The permutation problem, it's not an engineering problem we're going to solve in the next release. It's just how this technology works. Anyone who tells you otherwise either doesn't understand the math or they're filling you full of crap. Probably both. 2, every safeguard is a trade-off. Stronger safeguard, blunter tool, smarter tool, wider attack surface. The two move together. 3, perfect safety equals zero utility. A perfectly safe system is one that does nothing. We invented a name for that. We call it a brick. Right? We don't need a smarter brick. And the rule that connects all of those is the same rule that runs through this entire show from episode 10 forward. It's not the tool, it's the hand. The same model writes the cure and writes the malware, which is why the most effective safeguards in the long run are not the ones that target the system's outputs. They're the ones that target what people are doing with it. Machine? Last word?
It's the enduring paradox, innit? I mean, history doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. The incentive structure is always the engine. You can't code morality. You can only try to understand the forces that drive human behavior. And regulating the hand? That requires grappling with power, economics, and ultimately our collective will. A much tougher nut to crack than any algorithm.
Well, that's the show. Thanks for staying with the hardcore geek parts. I know it doesn't have the same dopamine hit as the doom pitch or the hype pitch. It's just the truth. It's what's going on. Okay? You can find the show at loopta.com. Spell it out. LOOPTAH.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, Instagram, Talk to Machines, all one word, or Ask the Machine questions. Substack for deeper reads, links to stuff we have on the show, things like that, and links on the site as well. Until next time, I'm Analog Scott. That was The Machine. Confidence is provisional. Verification's mandatory. Stay in the cockpit. And peace and love from your papa.